Okay, here's a bit of a people puzzler. I put a video out recently on my 5 horsepower Arians that was a no start after I messed up. So my son-in-law tells me that this MTD with a 5 horsepower tecumseh on it just stopped running when he was doing around the mailbox. So I brought it home. It definitely doesn't want to fire up. Got spark, it seems. Good compression. Looked at the valves look all right. The overlap's there. There's a little bit of the decompression stroke in the exhaust. Probably could be a bit more. That's why the compression is close to 120. So this time I pull the cup off there to check the flywheel key. And I look really close this time. Flywheel key was fine. So, but here's where you can screw up when you don't think, which I don't do sometimes. What I did was I checked the coil clearance. I was going to check, but as I turned it over, I could sort of hear the magnet touching the coil. So what I did was eventually I cleaned the rust off the magnets, but when I was going to readjust the coil, I did notice that the left bolt seemed a little bit looser than it should have been. So what I did was I re-gapped it properly. But then my blunder is, this is a pain with these tecumsehs. You see, those 3 head bolts have to come out in order to remove the shroud. And you have to actually remove the starter, in order, electric starter, to remove the shroud. What a pain. So I got this one finally loose with some heat and impact and gentleness and whatever. These 2 I can't get loosened. Last time I had to loosen these to get this bracket loosed enough to get the shroud out from underneath. So I left those. This I actually re-tapped. I didn't like the bolt on this one, so I re-tapped both the bowl hole and put the die on the bolt, clean them up. But I didn't want to have to put the starter on to try and see if it would actually fire up after I adjusted it. So stupid me, without properly torquing the nut holding the cup on, I tried the little cordless impact to try to get it to turn over. Of course, it would turn over in spark problem with no spark plug. But with the spark plug, that didn't work. So what idiot I did, I ended up stripping the nut that holds the flywheel cup on. So luckily, the crankshaft end was okay. I ran the die on it just in case. I happened to find another nut, which was a 1/2 inch fine thread, ran the tap through it, cleaned it up, and then I properly torqued it to the 35 foot-pounds. And then I didn't try an impact to spin it over, because I've done that on push motors many times and it seems to work. So I put the starter back on. So the only issue putting the starter back on, it started to turn over quickly, and it caught just enough, and I sprayed carb cleaner, then it fired. But then it wouldn't engage. The gear on the starter would come up. Well, you can see it. The gear on the starter would sort of come up but wouldn't go into the flywheel. Then I concluded that possibly where this top of the starter attaches, there might have been a couple washers behind here, because on some of the other ones, there's a bracket that holds the tank. I can't remember if that Arians had it or not, but I thought there was a bracket that may be missing on this one. Usually the bracket comes up and then the tank sits on in the bracket, has a groove besides being held by those screws. So anyway, so what I did was I put a couple washers behind there and got it turned over consistently with the starter, and away she went. Because of course I didn't want to put the shroud on to use the pull start, because got to take the head bolts out. So now I've got to take them out and put the shroud back on and cross my fingers and hope it still runs. But maybe that was it. I don't know. All I can know is that the coil just seemed to be touching a little bit, and maybe that was enough to kill the spark. A good enough spark, I don't know. But I'll put it back together and cross my fingers. What were they thinking when they designed this engine? Of course, put the electric starter on and see if it's all starting again. Now I got to put shroud back on. I got to take the starter off again to get the shroud on. What a stupid, stupid design. If you decide to take the fuel line off, when you take the tank off and work on the starter, don't forget to put the fuel line back onto the hose coming from the shutoff valve when you open the shutoff valve, or you see what you get. Starts and runs now, so I have no idea what he did when he was doing the mailbox, other than that it decided to be rusty enough, or that coil vibrated and touched the flywheel, because that's the only real change I made to it. Anyway, it's all set to go back.